Hello, this is Randy, and welcome back to Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. It's just me. I'd like to remind you that I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in my youth. I was in Venezuela, though I did spend a few months in the Texas San Antonio mission waiting for a visa. I really enjoyed Venezuela. I love the people. They're beautiful people. They're very kind. When I was there, it was in the late 70s, 1970s. The Venezuela had the best economy in South America, better than Brazil's even. Though Brazil was a great country as well. The Communist Party was doing their best to keep things stirred up. More than once, I walked into demonstrations they were holding. They didn't harm us or anything. They just kind of suggested it wasn't the place that two young boys from America needed to be. The Venezuelans worked with the Cubans for healthcare, and the Cubans sent their physicians over, which was interesting because they weren't as well trained as the Venezuelans, and they were trained for different things. But I never had a problem with a Cuban. They were always very kind people. Quite a few people in Venezuela were from Cuba. That when Castro took over, they left Cuba and went to Venezuela. In fact, in the first city I was at, the family that probably took the best care of me was from Cuba. They were just amazing and wonderful people, very kind. Now, getting back to the present, because of the problems that the Venezuelan government is going through, whether it be elections or the fact that they're nationalizing everything and not running it very well, there are an awful lot of our recent immigrants from Venezuela. I've seen them as a substitute teacher. I've seen them when I've assisted at a service project for a men's shelter here in Mesa. If it's an adult, usually they're wearing something that's indicative of coming from Venezuela. It could be a hat, a shirt. If they're a youth, a child, it may be just the way they talk. But boy, they get excited when you tell them you know about Venezuela. You've been to the town that they're from. I'll tell you, I think the world of them. I know a lot are struggling. None of the people that I worked with down there have stayed in Venezuela. Everyone that I've kept track of has left Venezuela. Some actually have gone to Australia, believe it or not. A couple have gone on to Chile, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, other countries in Central America. A few have made it as far as the United States. Some have gone to Spain, other places in Europe. But they had to get out of Venezuela because it was terrible. You may or may not know that members of the Church of Jesus Christ endeavor to save for a rainy day. One of the things we do is put aside food. And I had some close friends that there was a rumor that they had food. One day, some guys in the army came and took the food with guns. See, the people down there don't have guns. They're not legal. So they gave up their food, and that's what they were living on because unemployment there is super high. Wages are really low unless you happen to know somebody in the government. These folks didn't. So I guess what makes me sad is that these folks are really struggling to be able to be successful. And it isn't their fault. It isn't their fault at all. I worry about the dangers that we have with our border. I used to work out of Mexico. The most recent time was when the copper smelters, the big copper smelter here in Arizona, shut down because it couldn't meet the profit goals of the company that owned it. So they shut it down. They basically dismantled their acid factory and sold off parts of the smelter at the mine in San Manuel. Before they actually closed everything, I sent empty trucks in there to load every drop of acid I could buy for my customers, and I paid demurrage on their trailers. So I could have all the acid. I had over 60 trucks, just with no place yet for them to go, but I knew I would sell those trucks, and I did within a week. I was selling an awful lot of sulfuric acid. In fact, I was the biggest customer of that smelter. My company was. Now, the frustrating thing was trying to deal with Mexico because we were trying to bring it across the border. They really wanted to ship it to us in rail cars, but the problem was is we weren't set up to transload it. from in acid in rail cars. And they wanted to send us 24 at a time, and we could handle probably 3 or 4 a day. So 24 with demurrage starting. And demurrage is a fancy word for meaning after the free time you pay rent on that rail car or the trailer. I was just struggling to find a way. And finally, I was able to work with these men out of Mexico City, and they allowed me to bring trucks in. So my drivers would take the trailers to the border with Mexico. In this case, it was Douglas. They would take it across the border. Then they would have Mexican drivers pick up the trailer and take that down and fill it and bring it back filled. Then the driver would take it back across. Now, it took several hours to do this, but that's the only way we could work things out. Now, it raised costs for my customers. Most people don't realize that sulfuric acid is the number one chemical in the world. It's used for everything, from adjusting pH to being a part of a building material. It's just an incredible product. So, and we needed to have it. It was terrible when this smelter shut down. Some of my really good friends had to go other places. Some of them ended up in Australia, others in Chile. Not that they aren't really good at what they do. They are. That's why they got jobs in those locations. But I hated to see them go because they were people I could rely on and talk to and ask questions of and learn from. But the whole point is trying to keep things moving ahead. Most people don't understand about chemistry is that most chemicals are byproducts of other processes. For instance, sulfuric acid in the mines. When I was a boy, there was a real problem. I'm talking in elementary and junior high. There was a huge problem back east from Ohio eastward called acid rain. Where did acid rain come from? Nobody knew, but it was actually coming from the copper smelters here in Arizona. We would burn copper, then the sulfur would catch fire. It would go up the chimneys, would become sulfur trioxide, and that would mix with the clouds. And when it would rain in Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York, it would come down on your car and literally eat the paint off your car. So once they figured out that that's where it was coming from, that happened, I believe, when I was in high school. What they understood then is that we had to do something with that. So what we did in the Western United States is we captured that sulfur trioxide and we would get it wet, and that would convert it to sulfur dioxide. And then we would cool it and convert it to H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid. But then we had to do something with that sulfuric acid. We had to sell it because nobody could store that much sulfuric acid. The big producer of sulfuric acid here in Arizona is Asarco now. Then there's the big smelter up in Utah, which is Kennecott. So, but all of that acid has to be sold. The fluoride in your toothpaste is a byproduct of the fertilizer industry. Most people don't know that, but what it's used for is to strengthen your teeth. It is a real product and it will strengthen your teeth. As we get older, we probably don't need it. I personally prefer the communities that give fluoride tablets to the young children and keep fluoride out of their water, but that's just my personal preference now that I'm no longer in the industry. I used to sell a lot of hydrofluosilicic acid, which is fluoride, to customers because the community wanted fluoride in their water, or the community had decided they were going to have fluoride in their water. And it's really interesting where the community puts in fluoride in water, the water companies like Sparklets and others do just the opposite. So if the city is adding fluoride to their water, Sparklets and the other water companies will advertise that, hey, our water has no fluoride in it. That's just the way it works. There's nothing wrong with fluoride as long as you don't overdose on it. If you have too much of it, like Gila Bend does, which is a small town here in Maricopa County, you have to remove it because it'll turn your teeth terrible color and cause all kinds of other problems. So the right amount is perfect. Too much is not a good thing. Anyway, that's my story about lots of things, I guess. Venezuela and how it's all changed. The with the government taking over the oil facilities down there, I knew there was a problem because I have two friends that sell to those facilities. They told me that they weren't able to sell anything any longer because they would get a purchase order, but then the purchase order wouldn't get paid. So after not ever being paid, they couldn't sell them anymore. They'd have to close their credit. That happened to every refinery over there. And why they were doing that when they could make money selling the oil and gas, I don't know. But by not having the proper equipment in their refineries, they basically run the refineries into the ground. Oil refineries, copper refineries, any kind of refinery, you need to have the proper equipment. So that's my story and how I got from Venezuela to sulfuric acid. Hope you don't think I'm too crazy. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. I wish you the very best of days. Please like and subscribe. Tell your friends about us. And if you can, leave us a comment. Tell us what's working for you and what isn't. Sure appreciate you. Have a great one.